Okay. Um, Now let's move on to the second part no, of the our discussion on bioethics and its application to various healthcare situations. And this time we're going to focus on marriage. Uh, we'll discuss about the foundations and violations. Um, so in this section, we will cover three things. First, what marriage actually is under the Philippine law, especially Article 1 of the Family Code. Second, the grounds for annulment and separation, meaning the legal reasons a marriage can be ended or set aside. And third, the topic of homosexuality, which the original, uh, I think in the original learning handouts that I gave you, I did not include it. Okay. Um, but we need to address it because it touches real patients. As a nurse, you need to know marriage law because you document marital status. You also identify the next of kin, the person who makes decisions when the patient cannot. And you handle situations where a patient's marital status affects no their care. Like, for example, a separated but not annulled wife who needs to consent to her husband's surgery. Now, under Philippine law, she is still the legal spouse and may be the default surrogate decision maker. So this is not just legal theory, it affects the bedside. All right? Okay. Now, this is one of the most important legal definition in this discussion. So read the block no quote in the middle carefully. It comes from the Executive Order number 209, okay, series of 1987. That is the Family Code of the Philippines. The code defines marriage as a special contract of permanent union between a man and a woman, entered into in accordance with the law for the establishment of conjugal and family life. So let us break down each word. Special contract means it is not like an ordinary business contract. It has special rules set by law. Permanent union means it is meant to last for life. This is why there is no divorce in the Philippines. We are the only country no, in the world besides Vatican that is without divorce. The only way to end a marriage here are annulment, okay, here in the Philippines. So again, the only way to end a marriage here in the Philippines is via an annulment, which says that the marriage was never valid from the start. No? Or another way is through legal separation, which separates the couple but does not dissolve the marriage bond. Okay, between a man and a woman, this means same-sex marriage is not recognized under current Philippine law. Conjugal and family life means conjugal means related to marriage. So the purpose of marriage is to build a family. Foundation of the family means marriage is the base on which the family is built. And since the family is the base of the society, marriage stability affects society as well. Okay? Uh, you can also read in the definition of family code the, about the phrase inviolable social institution. Inviolable meaning it cannot be violated or disrespected. Okay, now look at the table at the bottom. It shows the 5 practical implications. The most important one for nursing is the first. Permanent union means the spouse is still the legal spouse even if they are separated. So when you have a patient who is unconscious and needs a surrogate decision maker, the legal spouse, even if they have been separated for years, no, but not legally, is often the default no, decision surrogate decision maker. So you need to know your hospital's policy on this. Okay? Now, flash in the screen right now is this slide comparing two different legal processes. Many people confuse them. Okay, so let us be clear. Annulment under Article 45 of the Family Code means the marriage was never valid from the start. It is like the marriage never happened. Legal separation under Article 55 means the marriage still exists, but the couple is allowed to live apart and divide their property. Now, the left column shows the six grounds for annulment. Okay, these are the conditions that existed at the time of the marriage. Number one, ground is one or both parties were under 21 and did not get parental consent. Okay. Number two, one party was of unsound mind, meaning mentally incapacitated. For example, severely intoxicated or mentally ill at the time of the wedding. Number three, consent was obtained by fraud. For example, the other person lied about being pregnant by someone else. Okay, number four, consent was obtained by force, intimidation, or undue influence, meaning the person was threatened or pressured. Number five, one party was physically incapable of consummating the marriage, meaning they could not have sexual intercourse, and this is incurable. So okay, number six, one party had a serious incurable sexually transmitted disease at the time of the marriage. So these are no the six grounds for annulment. The right column naman shows the grounds for legal separation. Notice they are different. These are the things that happen during the marriage that make it impossible to continue. Diba? For example, repeated physical violence, forcing the spouse to change religion, inducing the spouse into prostitution, imprisonment for more than 6 years, drug addiction, habitual alcoholism, lesbianism or homosexuality, bigamy or marrying someone else while still married, sexual infidelity, attempt on the life of the spouse or abandonment for more than 1 year. Now, take note, some of these grounds, especially lesbianism or homosexuality, as a ground for legal separation are themselves ethically controversial today, no, and may conflict with the anti-discrimination laws. Now, as a nurse, when you document, you write down the facts of what happened. For example, patient reports partner has been absent from the home for 14 months. Okay, so you do not write labels or judgments, no, in your documentation. Okay. Now, then we discuss, in relation to that, we now discuss homosexuality and the law, ethics, and nursing practice. We need to address it because you will care for LGBTQ plus patients, and you may be an LGBTQ plus nurse yourself. No, so LGBTQ plus stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, or questioning, and the plus covers other identities. Okay? Let us be clear about the two layers. First, the legal layer. The Philippine law does not recognize same-sex marriage. Article 1 of the Family Code defines marriage as between a man and a woman. Second, the ethical layer. This is where it gets important also for you. The Philippine Code of Ethics for Registered Nurses, no, based on the PRC Board of Nursing Resolution 220, Series of 2004, Article 3, Section 6, and the International Council of Nurses Code of Ethics both require that you provide care without discrimination, no, on the basis of sexual orientation. So what is sexual orientation again? Sexual orientation means who a person is attracted to, whether to the opposite sex, which means heterosexual, the same sex or homosexual, or both bisexual, or none at all, asexual. Now look at the two scenarios. Scenario one, Partner consent. A 38-year-old man is unconscious, in the ICU. His same-sex partner of 12 years is at the bedside and is listed as the emergency contact. Under Philippine law, the legal next of kin is still the patient's parents and not the partner. So what do? You consult your hospital policy, uh, you consult the hospital policy on the designated surrogate decision makers. Some hospitals let patients formally designate someone. You document the partner's role, in the care plan. And if there is conflict between the partner and the family, you escalate this issue to the ethics committee. Okay? Now, for the scenario 2, dignity in care, a transgender patient, transgender means a person whose gender identity or their inner sense of being male or female is different from the sex they were assigned at birth. Uh, so, uh, this transgender patient presents for a pap smear, okay, a screening test for cervical cancer. You use the patient's chosen name and pronouns like he or she or they. You explain every step. You offer a chaperone, another staff member in the room. You document the sex assigned at birth only where it is clinically needed, never as a way to disrespect the patient. The bottom line, you accompany, meaning you walk with the patient. You do not impose. No, meaning you do not force your beliefs. You document. You do not judge. Do you understand? Okay. So that is again the position, the nursing position. Accompany, do not impose, document, and do not judge. All right? Now let's move on to contraception and artificial reproduction. Okay? This is where technology, ethics, and law all meet at the bedside. We will cover 3 blocks. Now, first, contraception, the different methods, and the RH law. Second, artificial reproduction, meaning medical techniques that help couples get pregnant, like artificial insemination, IVF, and surrogacy. Third, the nurse's ethico-moral responsibility across all of these. Ethico-moral means having to do with both ethics, and morals. Uh, Ethics is again about right and wrong in general, while morals is about a person's own sense of right and wrong. Now, a quick legal note: the RH law was passed in 2012 as Republic Act 10354. It was challenged in court, and in 2014, the Supreme Court upheld most of it but struck down some provisions. So we have to know which parts are still in force. Okay, is that clear? Now, this is the contraception method matrix, a table you should know by heart. Now, contraception, also called birth control or family planning, means methods used to prevent pregnancy. So the table has 5 categories, from the oldest to the most modern. Row one is about the folk methods. Folk means traditional methods passed down through generation. Like, for example, pre-coital and post-coital douche, meaning rinsing the vagina with vinegar before or after sex. This actually does not work, by the way. Second is prolonged lactation, relying on breastfeeding to suppress ovulation. This works somewhat, but it is unreliable. The third one is coitus interruptus, which means the man withdraws before ejaculation, also called the withdrawal method, but it has a high failure rate. And the next one is coitus reservatus, which means the man does not ejaculate at all. Okay? Now, in the next row is the mechanical methods. These are physical barriers. The condom, which is worn by men, and they're also for women, and the diaphragm, a cap placed inside the vagina to cover the cervix, the opening of which, or the cervix, which is the opening of the uterus. Now, the condom is the only method that also protect against sexually transmitted infections. Now, the row 3 is the chemical methods. These are spermicides, chemicals that kill the sperm. They come as vaginal suppositories, no small solid pills that melt. They also come in tablets, jellies, creams, and foams. They work best when paired with a barrier method, and they can irrigate the vagina. Okay? Row 4 is about hormonal methods, and these use synthetic hormones, no? Synthetic hormones, meaning man-made versions of the body's natural chemicals. The purpose of which is to stop ovulation. Ovulation meaning the release of an egg from the ovary. Another purpose is to thicken the cervical mucus. When the cervical mucus are thickened, it blocks the sperm motility. Okay? Or it weakens the sperm motility. Now, one example is contraceptive pills taken daily, injections like DMPA or Depo-Provera given every 3 months. Okay? And then implants. These are small rods placed under the skin of the arm that last 3 to 5 years. So you must screen the patient for contraindications first. Contraindication meaning a condition that makes a treatment dangerous. So contraindications for hormonal methods include smoking if over 35, migraines with aura, specific type of severe headache with visual disturbances, history of blood clots in the vein, no, or venous thromboembolism, and breast cancer. Okay. Now, row 5 are about permanent methods, no, of contraception. Bilateral tubal ligation is one, which means cutting or blocking the fallopian tubes in a woman. And vasectomy, which is cutting the vas deferens naman, no, in man. Now, the vas deferens divides the tube that carries the sperm. So it is cut in vasectomy. Now, these require written consent under the reproductive health law, no, section 23, with a waiting period. Okay. Now, in the footer of this slide, is an important note. No, under RH law section 7, no one can be denied information and access to family planning, whether natural or artificial, subject to rules about minors. That means even if you personally object to contraception, for example, you're a practicing Catholic, you're a devout Catholic, and you are against contraception, because you also agree with the personalist vision of, a personalist vision, which is that marriage is a unitive and procreative dimension, and that contraception is definitely unacceptable. So that is what you believe, no? But even if no, you object to this contraception, you still have to give the patient accurate information. Okay. Good. It is still again your duty. So do not impose your own beliefs. Now, this slide summarizes the Responsible Parenthood and Reproductive Health Law, the Republic Act 10354, which was passed on December 18, 2012. No, we added this to also to the discussion because it is the main law that governs your nursing practice in reproductive health. The Supreme Court upheld the law in 2014, okay, but struck down some provisions. So what is enforced today is the post 2014 version. The law's main idea is that the government must provide reproductive health care services and information to all Filipinos, and reproductive health is a human right. Okay, now look at this 6 boxes. Box 1, the section 7, pertains to the access to family planning, which says that no person shall be denied information and access, whether natural or artificial methods. Minors need parental consent. Okay. Then box 2 or the section 9 refers to the maternal and newborn health care. All provincial hospitals must have emergency obstetric and neonatal care. Okay. Now, obstetric means related to pregnancy and childbirth, and neonatal means related to newborns. Now, box 3 or pertains to the section 12, which says that reproductive health education, no, or age and developmental appropriate reproductive health education must be taught in schools, both formal, meaning regular schools, and non-formal, meaning alternative learning. Okay? For box 4, pertaining to section 23 of the law, family planning, it is about the family planning supplies and devices. No, the government provides free contraception to the poorest households, procured or bought, not through the Department of Health. Okay. For box 5, pertaining to section 24, about conscientious objections. This is the most important section for nurses. Conscientious objection means a healthcare provider can refuse to perform a procedure on religious or ethical grounds. But, and this is critical, no, they must refer the patient to another provider who will do it. They cannot just abandon the patient just because the healthcare provider refused, no? Or because of his religious or ethical grounds. So they must refer the patient to another provider. They cannot just abandon the patient. Hospitals can object as institutions also for non-emergency services, but for emergency care can never be refused. Okay? For box 6, section 17, prohibited, it's about prohibited acts. It is illegal to deny care. Okay? Or it is illegal to deny care, refuse to provide information, refuse to refer, and so on. The bottom line for you as a nurse is if you have a religious objection to inserting an IUD, for example, or the intrauterine device, no, that small T-shaped device placed in the uterus, you may decline to do it yourself. But you must refer the patient to a colleague without delay, without judgment, and without documenting in a way that exposes the patient's decision. Okay, is that clear? All right. Now let's proceed to the next topic, which is artificial insemination. Okay. Artificial insemination, often abbreviated as AI, now is a medical technique where sperm, either from the woman's partner or from a donor, is placed directly into the cervix, no, which is the opening of the uterus, or into the uterus itself. Okay, and this is done to help achieve pregnancy. Okay, now the cervix method is called ICI, or the intracervical insemination. The uterus method is called IUI, or the intrauterine insemination. Okay, now there are two types of artificial insemination based on where the sperm comes from. Okay, now AIH stands for artificial insemination by husband. The sperm comes from the woman's own partner. AID stands for artificial insemination by donor. The sperm comes from an anonymous donor who is not the woman's partner. Okay, now look at the right side of the slide. The moral evaluation from a Catholic document called Donum Vitae. Donum Vitae is a Latin term for the gift of life. It is an instruction issued in 1987 by the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith. no, the Vatican office that handles Catholic doctrine. According to Donum Vitae, AIH, using the husband's sperm, is judged negatively when the technique separates the unitive and procreative meanings of the conjugal act. Okay? So it is judged negatively when the technique separates the unitive and procreative meaning of the conjugal act, meaning when the pregnancy is achieved through a technical procedure rather than through a physical act of love between a husband and a wife. Okay? So that is when it is judged negatively. Now, for AID, using a donor sperm, it is morally illicit, meaning forbidden, because it introduces a third party into the marriage. No, and the church says procreation should come only from the spouses. The church also says that the child has the right to be born from a father and a mother, no, who are married to each other and known to the child. Now, the nursing responsibility, no, is your job is to inform, not to impose. You document the patient's consent, the source of the sperm, no, whether partner or the donor, and the clinical follow-up according to your hospital's policy. You do not argue theology again with the patient. Okay? Yeah. If you can see the image no on the right, the image on the right shows ICSI, or intracytoplasmic sperm injection, a related microscopic technique where a single sperm is directly injected into the egg. Now, this is used in the IVF, which we will cover next. Okay? So I hope that you have understood, no? The difference between AIH judgment and AID judgment in Donum Vitae. Other one, it is judged negatively but not necessarily morally illicit. But the AID is morally illicit. Okay? Again, it's important that we understand this because majority of our patients are Catholics. Now, based on that image no, in the previous slide, uh, our next topic is about in vitro fertilization. This is usually called IVF. Okay? In vitro is the Latin term for in glass. So it refers to the fact that fertilization, where the sperm meeting the egg, happens in a laboratory dish, not inside the body. IVF was first successfully done in 1978. The first IVF baby uh, was Louis Brown, was born in England that year. Look at the 5-step timeline, no, at the top, on how in vitro fertilization, no, is done. Step 1 is the ovarian stimulation. The woman is given hormone injections called gonadotropins to make her ovaries produce multiple eggs in one cycle instead of just one. Then step 2 is transvaginal oocyte retrieval. Oocyte meaning is the medical term again for an egg. So the doctor uses an ultrasound guided needle, no, inserted through the vagina to remove the eggs from the ovaries. And then step 3 is laboratory fertilization. The eggs are placed in a dish with sperm. Sometimes they use conventional in vitro fertilization, not just where they just mix eggs and sperm. And sometimes they use yung ICSI, no, whose picture was in the previous slide, or the intracytoplasmic sperm injection, wherein one sperm is injected directly into each egg. Okay. Now for step 4, it is embryo culture. The fertilized eggs now, called embryos, at the early stage of pregnancy or a baby, are watched in the lab for 3 to 5 days to see which ones develop normally. Okay. And this step 5 is embryo transfer. one or more embryos are placed into the woman's uterus, no, through the cervix, using a thin tube. Now, if the embryo implants, no, or attaches to the lining of the uterus, uh, pregnancy will now begin, right? Now, look at the two cards, not the two cards below, but I think uh, it's not very, let me see if you can, sorry, if I can adjust the font. Yeah, so you can at least view it or read it. So, I, yeah, okay. Now, now the left card is about the clinical risks. Okay, uh, things you need to counsel the patient about because they are clinical risks. The first one is the OHSS, or the ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. It is actually a serious complication where the ovaries over-respond to the hormones. Now, symptoms include abdominal pain, fluid in the belly, and shortness of breath. So the patient must report these immediately. Ectopic pregnancy is when the embryo implants outside the uterus, usually in the fallopian tube. And this is a life-threatening situation and happens in about 2 to 5% of IVF pregnancies. Another is multiple gestation, where either twins or triplets is more common again with IVF, especially if more than one embryo is transferred. All right. The emotional burden, no, is another risk. No, it's actually huge. Success rate is only about 30 to 40% per cycle. So patients often face repeated disappointment, right? Now, screen them for anxiety and depression. Now, the right card is about the ethical concerns. The main one is the surplus embryos. Extra embryos that are created but are not transferred. Sometimes they are frozen for years, and patients face decision about what to do with them. Okay? Selective reduction, on the other hand, means reducing the number of fetuses in a multiple pregnancy to improve outcomes, which is a very difficult ethical decision. Okay? Um, because it violates again the principle of non-maleficence. For pre-implantation genetic testing, or PGT, it means testing embryos for genetic disease before transfer. But it raises questions about selecting desirable embryos. The Philippines has IVF clinics that are licensed and regulated by the Department of Health, by the way. Okay? And another issue is about third-party gametes and surrogacy arrangements. So these are some ethical issues no, in assisted reproduction. Now, one example, no, one real example is a patient who had successful IVF pregnancy and now has 6 frozen embryos uh, is uh, came to your clinic. She 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 doesn't know what to do with those 6 frozen embryos. Now your role is to lay out the options. Keep them frozen, donate to another couple, donate to research, or discard. But you have to explain the moral weight of each option under the patient's own belief framework. And it is the patient who will decide, not you. Okay? So, so when we talk about discussing, explaining the moral weight, then of course we mention about the ethical principles. All right? And we have to deliver it with the non-judgmental attitude. Okay? Now we discuss about the surrogate motherhood. No, we mentioned it in a previous slide. So surrogate motherhood is also called surrogacy. No, which a surrogate is a woman who carries a pregnancy for someone else with the intentions of giving the baby to the commissioning couple. Okay, after birth. Commissioning couple means the couple who arranged the surrogacy. So they are the ones who want the child. Now, there are three stakeholders in every surrogacy arrangement. Uh, Stakeholder means a person who has an interest or concern in the matter. So column one is the surrogate. She carries the pregnancy and takes on all the medical risks. The pregnancy induced hypertension, the gestational diabetes, the postpartum hemorrhage. Also, she carries these risks. Okay, she also takes on the psychological burden of carrying a baby for 9 months and then giving it away. In the Philippines, surrogacy is not regulated, meaning there are no specific laws governing it. And this creates a real risk of exploitation, so especially for poor women who might be tempted by the money. Okay. Then, second is the commissioning couple. They are usually motivated by infertility, inability to have a child naturally, or because of repeated pregnancy loss. They may use their own genetic material, the husband's sperm and the wife's eggs, no? Or they may use donor eggs or sperm for the surrogacy. The big legal issue for them is birth registration. Under Philippine law, Civil Code Article 164, the woman who gives birth is presumed to be the legal mother. So the surrogate, not the commissioning mother, is the legal mother at birth. Okay? This means the commissioning couple may need to go through adoption to formalize their parentage. Okay? Now, for the column three, the child. Child has a right to know their identity, their parentage, and to grow up in a stable family. If the surrogacy is done across borders, meaning international surrogacy, the child could end up stateless, meaning without any country's citizenship. The bottom quote is from the Donum Vitae. No, the Catholic Church says surrogacy is contrary to the unity of marriage and the dignity of procreation. Okay, now for the nurse, if you encounter a known surrogate in your practice, we have to document accurately. We also need to screen for coercion, meaning check if she was pressured or tricked, and make sure she gave informed consent before the embryo transfer. All right? Yeah. There were scandals, no, in Cambodia and Thailand about surrogacy in 2014, where commercial surrogacy, were exploiting poor women. So if you happen to read this, these are actually cautionary cases. All right. Now, what is your ethical responsibility as a nurse in reproductive health care? You are bound by, again, four anchors, no? An anchor is something that holds you steady. So the first anchor is the Philippine Code of Ethics, okay, for registered nurses. The second is the International Code of Ethics for Nurses. Okay. So again, the first one is the PRC code, the Philippine Code of Ethics. No, under the PRC Board of Nursing Resolution 220, Series of 2004. The second is the International Code of Ethics for Nurses. And the third one is the four principles of biomedical ethics from Duchamp and Childress, the two American ethicists who wrote the standard textbook in 1979, and now in its 8th edition, which is 2019. Now, the fourth is the patient's own value system, the fourth anchor. Okay, now the four principles now that we have discussed, the autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice from Beauchamp and Childress, biomedical ethics. These four principles are the daily decision-making tool that you will use most often. Okay? So look at the boxes, no, for autonomy. I will not anymore be discussing it in details because we have discussed this already in the previous discussions. No, we actually had case scenarios about these four principles. Okay. Now, what's important right now is that uh, for you to remember, no, that we do not withhold reproductive health information from poor patient or unmarried patients. The RH law mandates equitable or fair access. Okay? But of course, conscientious objections are allowed. No, under the RH law section 24, meaning you may decline a procedure you object to if it's against your own beliefs, but you must refer the patient to someone who will do it. Okay, so remember, you are also supported by law to have that conscientious objection. So do not be afraid. Okay, if it's really against your views, your values, then you can decline, but refer the patient readily to another one who can do it. Never abandon the patient. No, when the four principles are in conflict, then you escalate. Well, you try to come up with your own ethical evaluation, but definitely you need to escalate to your hospital's ethics committee. You do not make that call alone. Do you understand? Okay. This one we will be discussing in the next part. Next part of the recording. So our discussion will not be very long.